Hi there, my name is Philip Ideson. I want to welcome you to the Art of Procurement podcast, the podcast that helps you, a forward-thinking procurement professional, position yourself and your team to proactively take advantage of the revolution that's taking place in procurement today. By interviewing industry trailblazers and sharing insights from our own experiences, my team and I pull back the curtain and shine a light on the strategies, tactics, and tools that procurement teams are using to elevate their impact. And today on the show, I'm joined by Natasha Gurevich. Now, Natasha has enjoyed an illustrious career so far in procurement. Most recently, she was the first Chief Procurement Officer for Nike, and previously to that, she was VP of Global Procurement at Salesforce. Natasha's also enjoyed procurement leadership roles at McKesson, PayPal, Gap, and Visa. Now, Natasha and I also worked directly together over 10 years ago at Procure, and it was great to catch up in the podcast. And finally, just last week, Natasha announced her new venture as the founder and CEO of Candor Procurement. Now, Natasha is a straight-talking procurement change agent for sure, and in our conversation, we talked about her approach to driving change and balancing team goals with people needs. We discussed a couple of things that procurement can do better at, building on a LinkedIn post that she recently made on the same topic, and then finally, we started to dig into the procurement and CFO relationship. Now, there's lots of nuggets in here, and I enjoyed the conversation. I hope you enjoy listening as much as I did chatting with Natasha. So let's start where I asked Natasha if she found procurement or if procurement found her.
Procurement found me. By training, I am a physical education teacher and a gymnastics coach. I got that in Russia, moved here to the States 28 years ago. My then husband promised me that it's going to be 6 months trip for me to take English as a second language classes. Mm-hmm. And 28 years later, I can say that I think I mastered that. One thing led to another, and like 6 months passed, and he asked me if I would like to go back to Russia. He said, no, I would be open to explore another 6 months. And then I just started looking for a first job when I was able to put a couple of sentences together. And so the first job happened to be a temp at the Gap in the procurement department. I did not know what was procurement. My job was, I was a temporary backfill for a print buyer. So I didn't know what the print was as industry. And I never looked at the retail as an industry. So I came from a completely different background. So it found me. I've been in procurement for 25 years. And a couple of times I tried to be unfaithful and deviate from the straight road. I was always mesmerized by merger and acquisition and corporate strategy. So a couple of times I tried to get there, but it hadn't meant to be. And
bringing you back in.
I've always been brought back. Yes, because the next opportunity had always been even more interesting than the previous one. So I'm glad it happened. I am madly passionate about procurement because I think it's a hidden gem of corporate world, and I think it's a hidden gem of people's activities. It stimulates you intellectually. It's a magical field for problem solvers. It puts in front of you something that you hadn't faced with yesterday, and it's just a great way to be creative while being business-oriented and business.
Now, at one moment in your career, we actually crossed paths. We were both at ICG Commerce, became Procure, and ultimately was bought by Accenture. And those were some pretty interesting days, I think, 13, 14, even 15 years ago now. I wonder how working on the provider side, you practitioner stepped into the provider side. Did that stint on the provider side kind of inform how you then thought about procurement when you got back into practitioner and leadership roles?
Yeah. When I came back to in-house, I had different appreciation for for suppliers. Because whenever we in-house, we are just so much heads down into our own business. And because when you're in-house, you don't just do procurement, you do team management, you do preparation to the meetings, you have presentations, you work a lot with your internal stakeholders, you bring the good news about procurement across organization, you're selling a lot. So you rarely have enough time or mental capacity to look outside, but you're also forgetting that your suppliers are the wonderful sources of that outside knowledge. And coming back to in-house was certainly a great reminder of relying more on the suppliers because, hey, when I'm in-house, I only see myself. I only see one company. When I'm on the provider side, I see multiple clients. I see what's happening across the world. It's not that I'm trying to make everyone the same, but I can bring some knowledge and experiences and lessons learned and know-how that had been experimented by others with.
Yeah, one of the things I really took was this feeling of that as procurement, we are a service provider within a business, even if you're, within an organization as a practitioner organization, and that, when you're in a third party, you have no choice but to, you have to deliver to your KPIs, everything that's contractually, you're contractually bound by. Sometimes when you're in as a practitioner, you kind of forget about that stuff. So it was big for me as a reminder that we have to operate as a procurement organization in a way that compels people to want to work with us and look at ourselves as a business within a business. And I think that was really powerful for being on the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the job of a CPO is to sell. Like, I haven't bought anything like for the last 10, 15 years. I'm missing the moments when I can negotiate the contract, thrill of getting close to signing the deal, thrill of bringing parties together and finding kind of like the common ground that works for everyone. I don't experience it. It's no longer part of my job, right? Part of my job is to sell. And that certainly is, it's kind of like when you're on the provider side, you have to sell twice. You first have to procurement and then to the rest of the company.
It's funny you say about working on deals, the high of doing a deal, you think about it, what gets you hooked on procurement is those early days in the profession and those early days are more junior. And so that's what you're typically doing. And I think that there's probably a part of all of us that looks back and thinks, yes, from a career perspective, I went on a journey I wanted to go on, but I miss those. I miss doing the deal and the thrill of doing the deal.
Yeah, that's true. But, I started in sourcing, so I started with the deals. But for the last 10 years, I've been focusing more on enablement, on the systems, on the processes, on the tools, because that is actually less developed for majority of the companies than approach to negotiation, contract development, supplier management, and kind of like the sourcing side of the house. And besides, majority of the companies that I've served, they are growing the growth companies, and they constantly on the way of kind of like marching faster than the systems can enable them to do so. So that look from the process, platforms, tools, synergy perspective have been more critical. So it's kind of like CPO or not, you're constantly learning the new stuff that you have to deal with. So that's one of the other reasons what makes procurement so interesting is that, like at my last in my last company, one of the charges or one of the responsibilities I had was to build business diversity and inclusion program pretty much from scratch, right? To meet companies' obligation to generate $1 billion with diverse population, with diverse community, sorry. And it was fascinating because I'm like, okay, well, a new thing to try again.
Right. And if you're not, that curiosity, when you think about skills that you look for in procurement, professionals and procurement leaders, it's that curiosity to want to learn and not to think, I know how to do it, this is the way to do it, I'm just going to rinse and repeat.
Yeah. No, rinse and repeat doesn't work because unless you're staying with the same company, but again, then it doesn't work because you're applying the same practices that do not elevate the company and do not propel it upward and forward. You actually always have to come up with new solutions, especially when you're changing the companies, because the environment is different, the business objectives are different, and intellectual curiosity is kind of like it's a prerequisite for a successful procurement professional, problem solving and the interest of figuring things out.
Yeah, I think a large part of the roles that you have had recently have involved a lot of change. And so I just wonder if you could share a little bit about your philosophy and kind of how you think about driving change, especially in large organizations where there's probably a lot more complexity at play as well.
Yes. That fear of change is not just some myth. It actually is a real thing. And it's a real thing when there is a Latin term assigned to it. It's called Metathesiophobia.
Okay.
Metathesiophobia. Took me a couple of repeats to learn how to pronounce it. But fear of change is a real thing. And whenever you are, you're not making that change in the jungle, right? You're making it in the living organism of any business. And you absolutely have to kind of like be clear that it will impact people. And even though you're ready for it, others are not. And you absolutely have to take it into consideration. And I think with whenever you're approaching to driving change, you have to realize that you will be dealing with different groups of people. One group, whatever you're proposing, like 20% will be instantly on board. Mm-hmm. Just because they hear the vision, they are excited, they want to move forward. There's other people that actually appreciate change. They see change as an opportunity to elevate and make their job more interesting. And so they're on board. There will be 20% that will be absolutely off board. They will never sign up. They will never agree. It doesn't matter how masterfully and artfully you will try to convince them. They will not follow. They will be objecting, obstructing, resenting, and they will not be on board. And there'll be the remaining 60% that will be sitting on the sidelines trying to figure out if you're going to succeed or fail, right? And that's totally normal. You have to work with all three groups. You can't choose the only 20% that are all rah, let's go, right? Because you can't make a change with 20%. You have to work with all of them. So first is a recognition of this difference. I'd say the second important step is recognizing the significance of everything what was done before you made rhyme and reason at the time when it happened. Because very often the new voice comes and kind of like presents in the position that, okay, now I came and we're going to do things in a great way. But because everything what was here before me is just blah.
Why do you do that? What were you even thinking about?
Exactly. No, respect the past. Yeah. You respect the past. Then you know that you at least winning some respect from people who you will be introducing the change to. I'd say the third step is make your vision very clear. So if your vision is not clear to you, then take more time to work on your vision. Because if you're not clear in your head, for the people who actually have no idea what's happening in your head, where you're coming from, what's your motivation, they will be even more confused. All right. So then the next step, you have to repeat your vision often. Because the new things don't settle with people when you just repeat it once. You have to repeat it a couple of times because it just has to dwell, has to settle in. That is important aspect is that change, that you're doing the change for the organization, but organization is not some mystical organism. It consists of individuals, consists of different teams. Give examples of what that change means to them, what it will bring to them, how it will impact them. Give specific examples. Connect the change to their work. Because a marketing manager may think that implementing SRM, for example, will have nothing to do with them. It will. Yeah, actually, it will increase your speed to market because you will have the agencies that already been vetted, pre-selected, contract is signed. You will know that this is the digital agency that produce services in Europe and all of that. So it's kind of like driving a change through organization is a method, and it requires a lot of patience, a lot of compassion, a lot of empathy, a lot of determination. You have to walk very fine balance between remembering why you're driving the change and kind of like sticking to your guns while listening to the feedback from people who are impacted by that change. Because if you don't listen to feedback, then you will earn a reputation of being rigid or being very much in your head, of not listening to people and therefore not collaborating. But if you listen to every single piece of feedback and start acting upon it, then you will never have a path to implement because you will always be adjusting, and people will think that, well, does she know where she's going? Or she's just like coming up with a new plan and like moving where the wind blows every time where she gets a new piece of feedback. So it's driving transformation of whatever scale, driving a change in the organization requires a lot of preparation and being very methodical and being very aware of the environment, being very present, and have a unique ability of zooming in into what's happening today and then zooming out and seeing how what's happening today will impact the next 5 years.
And you talked about empathy and compassion and the people side, and obviously I think sometimes where you can go wrong is make it very fact-based. Like, this seems obvious, we're going to just push people in a certain direction without bringing teams along for the ride. And of course, as we always say, we're saying from a consulting perspective, sometimes some teams may not make it along the journey because, they kind of select out of that. But you can't ignore that as you're going on your change journey. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about, you recently posted on LinkedIn, things that we as procurement can do a little bit better. And, I don't necessarily need to go through every single one of them, but what you posted really resonated with me and actually led me to reach back out to you and say, hey, I agree with these. Let's have a chat about them. You talked about underestimating the power of category management as one of the things that we can do better. Now, I just wonder if you could share a little bit about that, because that's something that, I've spent a lot of time on recently. I'm a really big believer in category management, but I think that generally speaking, we've probably failed, maybe failed's too strong a word, but failed to enable category management to live up to its potential. I just wonder what you see from a category management perspective.
I put a lot of faith into category management being a driving factor in procurement success for the next 5 years. Mm-hmm. My colleagues who drive technology solution for procurement may be upset with me, but I think that proficient category manager can make greater difference than super sophisticated technology tool.
Yeah.
I'll share with you why. Every company spends money. Where the money goes, how effectively they're used, are they used with the right providers? Are we getting exactly what we paid for? All these aspects depend on if the category leader manages the category in a smart way. If the category leader understands the market in their specific spend categories just as good or probably better, just as well or better than the suppliers playing in that spend category, Are they proactive in understanding complexities of the categories and external environment, economic status, geopolitical factors, and how they will impact on that category? Does the procurement professional, i.e. category leader, works with a marketing or supply chain or HR stakeholders to be proactive in strategizing that, hey, these are the changes that are happening in the industry. Let's get prepared to that. Let's map them out against their business objectives and see if we have the most artful part, how to deliver our results. Like, is our solution simple, elegant? Will it maximize the value that we can generate through your relationships with a particular supplier? And are we using what we bought, right? So when you see the marriage between procurement professionals, category leads, and stakeholders and business owners, it's a song. It's just a poem. It's so smooth. It's not that stakeholders are trying to find a way to bypass their procurement colleagues. They actually bring their procurement colleagues every time when they need support, because they know procurement had been ahead of the game, because the category leaders had looked at their category in a very educated and proactive way. Like, reading the trades, knowing your field is so very important.
I always feel like you talked about technology not necessarily being the solution to everything. And I agree with you, especially in category management. I think that one of the challenges that we have in procurement is that category management is so people reliant, it's extremely difficult to scale it because it relies on the people that you have within your organization. And, you know, in a lot of companies, it's hard for them to get expertise across all categories of spend, just the nature of, you know, you don't have the ROI that supports it. How do you think about, you know, how building kind of that people infrastructure around category management, and where do you access the talent from? You know, how do you access it if you don't have the ability to get experts in all areas, or do you just truly focus on the categories where you do have expertise? How did you kind of balance all those questions when you staffed up and have staffed up a number of category management kind of focused orgs?
I would say that you actually don't need that many category leads. Mm-hmm. You need to have true experts who know their field, and but you don't need that many, right? I think that entire procurement workload should always be analyzed from the perspective that what do we have to keep in house? What can we automate? What can we eliminate? Mm-hmm. What can we outsource? When we talk about category management and category leads, you don't need to have, like, if you have 10 sourcing people, you can have 3 category leads. And that would be, I think that can do the job. Obviously, it all depends on the complexity. For example, if we're talking about supply chain space, you need to have someone for inbound, someone for outbound, one for 3PL. It would be nice to have someone else for capital, but you can combine it, right? But if you are in marketing, for example, someone who knows media well may not necessarily know creative and digital just with the same level of familiarity. In corporate professional services, probably if someone is working on contingent workforce, they can provide their category management knowledge in consulting and in legal.
Yeah.
But someone who is running training does not require the same level of expertise. But if someone is stepping into insurance, that certainly is a different level of expertise. So I would say that you look at your landscape and you determine where the skills are cross-functional and where they are specific. And you just groom these people. Like, I am a little bit, so I can tell you that being in this field for 25 years, now when I'm looking for a particular level of expertise, I know where to go. And because I just worked with these people in the past, I groomed them, I treated them well, and they hopefully would be willing to work with me again.
The power of the network.
A power of 25 years in the field. Also.
Yeah. No, I feel very similar. You know, we have clients even that come asking for experts in certain areas, and you just, for so many of those categories, you know people you've worked with. And, you know, I kind of have go-to people in the field, but it is still very people-based and very experience-based, but also how I always say that, you know, you can be the foremost expert in the world in something, but you have to know how to then tell stories around that and how to build relationships. That the knowledge on its own is nowhere near enough. That's kind of the price of entry.
Yeah. I would also say that I've seen people who landed in procurement because it's their kind of like corporate rotation. And I've seen people who like married to procurement and they're like, no, I am procurement manager. And like some years from now, I'll have your job. And like both have place and reason to exist, but you know very well that those who committed to procurement, they can become category leads and they can accumulate expertise in many different categories.
Well, I'm going to include a link in the show notes for today's episode to the article that you wrote, because there's a few other on there that are interesting. But I do want to spend the rest of the time that we have today just talking a little bit about the CFO, the procurement and the CFO relationship. How do we get the attention of the CFO?
You know how to be provocative.
How are you going to grab the attention of the CFO?
Oh, I think if I would know answer to that question, you would have a private island in my Monaco estate, right? How do we do that? I would say one key factor is why we don't get their attention or don't get the right level of attention from the CFOs on a regular basis is credibility of the numbers. Mm-hmm. It's amazing that as long as procurement field exists, everyone defines savings in 25 different ways. When you're migrating from one organization to another, when joining a new organization, you can never know for sure what kind of savings definition and methodology they use. And if the CFO had been with the company longer than the CPO, and the statistics shows that CFO's tenure is usually 2.5, 3 times longer than the average tenure of a CPO, then every new CPO comes with their own savings definition and methodology. And that creates the degree of confusion, right? So maybe first thing first, it would be great if we procurement professional would establish some sort of unity in how we define savings and what kind of definitions we assign to. So I would say that's first, kind of consistency in our approach to defining the value. I would say second is credibility of the numbers. And nothing brings more credibility to the savings than validation from FP&A, right? When they can, when they review meaningful deals, when they can say that, yes, the savings indeed was delivered and where it was delivered. But I would say probably the most critical and important component is that where does the savings go to? Do I as a CFO see the money? Or because if procurement indeed negotiated a better deal, and if there is indeed significant value had been delivered to the company, why do I as a CFO not see it in the bottom line? Maybe because there's no visibility. Maybe because process, maybe because the budgeting, the savings, reporting is not a connected loop. And how can you create it as a connected loop? Or maybe because the money got already spent. If the money got already spent, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Because if it's spent in a smart and accurate way, it potentially had generated much higher ROI or significant ROI, that if the savings wouldn't have been delivered, it would have nothing to invest that would generate ROI. So maybe that reinvestment of the savings is extremely beneficial to the company. But how do you track it?
Mm-hmm.
How do you create visibility to it? So when the sales has a target, it's very visible if the target is met or not met, because companies historically pay much greater attention to the top line, and they should, because that's their revenue. But when times get tough, and in my 25 years, times get tough at least once in 5 years, usually once in 3 years. So whenever I join an organization and the organization believes that money grows on the trees, I say, yes, they do, but not for a long time. I can promise you that.
It's funny, we talk about the hamster wheel. There's a hamster wheel of the business cycle, and you come in good times and you want to drive relationships and innovation, and then all of a sudden the winds have changed and it's all about cost cutting. And it's very difficult as a procurement leader, but also an organization that's built below them, to actually survive both parts of the cycle, because you get seen as being, well, you're too easy on your suppliers. Let's go and get some hard-hitting, savings-focused person to come in. And they come in, and then they upset everybody. And so when the business cycle changes, it goes back to, well, you've already upset all the relationships, so we need to be nice to our suppliers again. Let's bring somebody in that doesn't care so much about savings.
Yeah. Well, and I would say that savings is not necessarily upsetting suppliers, because it's not about, like, cutting suppliers on the margins is so yesterday. It's kind of like, there is a better way to generate value, right? You don't have to just be like really pushy with your suppliers. So I would say that consistency of what savings is, credibility of the numbers, i.e. confirming that by finance professionals that the savings indeed have been delivered and generated, and then upfront decision on what do we do with the savings. And that requires very specific and detailed partnership between CPO and procurement leadership, with finance, with the CFO, FP&A, accounting, like budgeting teams, to identify, what do we want to do with the savings? Do we want to keep it with the business unit and for them to keep investing 100% of it, 50% of it? Do we need it to go back to the bottom line? Do we want to reduce the budgets? That's not procurement decision. That's the CFO decision. Procurement is there to execute the vision. And the decision can be different year from year, exactly what you said. In the year when it's time to focus on the budgets, then it goes back to the budgets. When it's time to focus on EPS, it goes to the bottom line. When it's time to focus on the growth, it goes back to the business. So it has to be fluid, but for some reason, I do not see it working well in many companies. In fact, I don't see this connection even existing in many companies. When you and I were in procurement, I was serving one of my clients, and they had very well established process. They were reporting their P&L reduction, their like hard savings, structural savings, to the Wall Street. And they made the direct correlation between the cost they took out of the system, out of the structure, to their EPS. And so in that environment, the CFO had very close connection with procurement organization, and they knew which deal generated how much value and where the money went. Very few organizations, for some reason, pay close attention to it, even though I think if CFOs would, it actually would solve a lot of economical, commercial dilemmas that they are facing.
Yeah, we almost don't want to be the ones that's making the decision. We don't want stakeholders to believe that working with us means their budget's going to get cut, or it's not on us to be making that decision. But I think what you said about FP&A, going back again to those Procurian days, I think getting sign-off, having set methodologies like you talked about before, having sign-off at the beginning and the end of a project so everyone's in agreement with those methodologies as you go through a project, having FPA as part of that and validating how savings are calculated. What they do with that is not necessarily a procurement discussion, but actually having it at least tracked and measured and memorialized that this was the value that procurement brought to the table in doing a particular project is as much as you, and then it's for a CFO to decide whether they're going to take that out of budgets or not, and whether that's going to drop to the bottom line. But yeah, it's kind of the objection to, well, I don't see all these savings you're talking about that you've saved me. So, I talk about procurement math, it's kind of how you're making these savings up. And that's the easiest way to not have credibility with the CFO. Now, I know it's about time to wrap up, but I did have one last question, which is more of a career question before we do finish the conversation today. And that's, when you look back and reflect on your career to date, is there something that somebody who is listening, who they aspire to become a CPO, is there something that they should over-index on in terms of their focus or development?
Hard to name one thing. I'll name a couple. As a procurement professional, I have to negotiate with you, right? You ask me for one, I have to ask for three, so we'll settle on two. I would say one of them is learn very, very deeply, know intimately how your company makes money. Mm-hmm. Because it's not as simple as it is on the surface, right? If I think of one of my former clients, for example, the company was producing cleaning supplies, right? Well, or like we CPG company, yep. We make money by selling goods in the
thousands of SKUs.
Yes, but what type of SKUs? What's in your assortment? How much do you produce and how many do you sell at the full price? At 10% discount? 30% discount? Don't sell at all? How many SKUs generate 80% of the revenue? 20% of the SKUs? Do you have to produce? It's not that it's procurement decision how many SKUs the company should produce, but it is for procurement professionals' education and broad understanding where they can help the company. Because if you know where the company spends money and where the company generates revenue, which often not the same thing, then you know where you can be mostly of help. Yeah. Know your company objectives, because sometimes because even if you like super duper the most knowledgeable procurement professional, if you come to the organization and you just create procurement strategy that is floating in the air and is not connected to company's objectives, to the stakeholders' objectives, then you just build a procurement strategy that nobody will be able to follow or implement or integrate. And it's just, we can build it anywhere else and it will not generate the result. So from that perspective, one of the companies I used to work for have been extremely, extremely transparent about the goals. So in the beginning of the year, you're setting the goals, and within a certain time frame, everyone's goals, starting from the CEO of the company, finishing with any person, like any administrative assistant, whoever, like everyone in the company, they publish their goals. And if you work in procurement, you can go to any of your stakeholders and their goals are published on the intranet, and you can always find them and you know how to align your strategy to their goals. So knowing company's objectives, knowing how company makes money, just getting deep inside of the project, of what the company company focuses is very, very important. And people, the higher you go, the more remote you are from the work, the more remote you are from the projects, from the deals, from interaction with suppliers, right? So because I don't do projects, my people do projects. So my role is to take care of the people who do projects, to create the environment where the doors are open for them and they are well equipped with the tools, with healthy environment, healthy spirit, and kind of like good, just good environment with their teammates where they can do their work. So learn how to create an environment for procurement professional to bring their best self to work, because if they can, they will unlock phenomenal potential to the entire company.
Well, Natasha, there's so many things we could have dug into further, and I'm sure that we'll get the opportunity to do that again. But I want to thank you so much for just spending the time with me, just having a chat about some of your experiences and perspectives, and also, of course, helping the listeners benefit from your experience. What I'll do is I will place a link, one to the LinkedIn article that we talked about, also to your LinkedIn profile for anybody who might want to connect with you directly in the show notes for today's episode. So that's going to be at artofprocurement.com/podcast for anybody listening. And with that said, Natasha, just thank you. If this episode struck a chord with you, please do send it to somebody. We grow here at Art of Procurement through word of mouth, and that would be really appreciated. You can also support us by giving us a thumbs up, a star rating, or a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Since 2015, we've built the world's largest free resource for procurement professionals looking to elevate their impact. Our resources span podcasts like this, videos, blog posts, papers, and events. To join us on the inside and to ensure you never miss an episode, a webinar, event, or a post, please do subscribe to our weekly newsletter, This Week in Procurement. You can do that at artofprocurement.com/subscribe. That's artofprocurement.com/subscribe. Thank you for joining us today, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.